What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now let's get cozy and start today's episode. I feel like this conversation today is coming at such a good time. I have been a boundary ninja, and I shared this in my newsletter with my community last week about really taking a stand for what is the priority project in your life, especially when it comes to heart projects. And, I am taking a stand for writing my next book. And it means that I have to say no. So instead of making no be a bad thing, it's actually, creating space and openness and time to do the creative work and really celebrating our no's. So that's what I've been doing recently is saying no to really cool opportunities and projects so that I don't fill in the open space with more things to do that keeps me from doing the thing that I really, really want to be doing, especially when we're diving into creative work. We need some space for spontaneity. We need space for rest. And I've been doubling down on my self-care this year, and also just time to unplug and connect with my family. We unplug at 6:30 p.m. on weekday nights. And, I'm taking my dance class and getting my acupuncture needle naps and just not trying to fill in the space. So that's kind of my question for you is where in your life might you be filling in the space to do more when you actually need that space so that you can create more? So my question, as we lean into this conversation today is, are you willing to be patient enough and consistent enough to do the work that lights your soul on fire? And if you know that it's time to pursue your dreams, even when you see no clear path on how to achieve that dream, then this episode of the Lead with Love podcast is for you. So in today's conversation, I get cozy with my friend, John Lee Dumas. And John Lee Dumas is the host of Entrepreneurs on Fire, which is an award-winning podcast where he interviews inspiring entrepreneurs who are truly on fire. He even opens his conversations with, "Are you ready to ignite?" which is pretty cool. And he's actually done over 2,000 episodes, and he has 1 million plus listeners a month. He's generated, multiple 7 figures of revenue in his business, and he definitely says that he is just getting started. So if you tune in to the end, you'll actually hear kind of his next chapter, his evolution of where he's going in his business, which was very surprising and really, really cool. So you'll definitely want to tune into that. And some things that we talk about are the power of consistency, patience, and following your heart, and also how imposter syndrome can hold us back from doing the work that we want to put out in the world, and why who you spend your time with matters. We also talk about mentorship, which is really cool. And then the one thing you should do before creating your next product or service. So if you're in the entrepreneurial space, you definitely want to listen to that. And I just found it fascinating that it is something that he has many, many years of his entrepreneurial experience experience and success, and he still does this one thing, which can feel time consuming, but it is eye-opening. So definitely listen. And so you can find the full show notes from this episode over at jadasellner.com/146, where I also link to my 2 interviews I did on Entrepreneurs on Fire when John interviewed me. And I definitely want you to listen to the first one I did, How to Transform Your Body from the Inside Out. And I would even say your business. And that's where I share my story of how I grew my email list to over 300,000 email subscribers. And if you want to grow your tribe online in a fun and easy way, I want you to check out my free 5-step challenge roadmap. And you can go to buildyourchallenge.com to get that freebie sent straight to your inbox. Now, let's get cozy with John Lee Dumas. Hey, JLD.
Hey, I'm on fire, Jada. What's going on, girl?
I love it. I know you're on fire because you're in Puerto Rico. I am so excited to connect and have this conversation with you because I know we've connected many, many years ago. And one of the questions you would ask me over and over again is, when are you going to start your podcast?
Yes.
So it has finally happened, and it's been so cool. I was a guest on Entrepreneur on Fire twice, which was such an amazing experience. And I love the questions that you ask. And it's just great to be on the other side with the interview hat on.
Well, I did tell you pre-interview that it was very liberating to give you control of this interview, and I can't wait. And let me just say before we dive into things, I'm fired up that your voice, your message, your mission is going to get out to the world even in a more impactful way through your own podcast here. So I am super excited for you.
Awesome. And for those who don't know, JLD stands for John Lee Dumas. And I have a favorite memory of mine. I think when we were in San Francisco, you were hosting a mastermind, and we went on a little San Francisco adventure where we had tacos. Was it tacos that we had?
It was tacos. Some people had burritos, but some people had tacos.
Right. It was like these fusion tacos and then indoor mini golf.
It was a blast. It was that taco place, actually. It was either the day before or earlier that day. Tim Ferriss had stopped. I know it was the day before. And he was just like, I need to take you to my favorite taco place. And so we went there. And then the next night you guys were all over and we're like, we got to take you to Tim Ferriss's favorite taco place. And it was amazing.
I love it. So one of my favorite questions to lead with is, what does leading with love mean to you? And how do you put love into practice in your business?
So for me, love has always meant the heart. And for me, the heart is so close to your gut. And for me, the gut is the intuition. And so I always look to intertwine the two. I'm like, where is my intuition leading me? Where is my gut? Where is my heart? Like, where is that kind of mix down there working? Because there's been a lot of situations where my gut, my intuition, my heart has thrown up red flags. And, my brain said, well, but it's a smart thing to do, John. It's a smart thing to do. Go forward that way. And it's never worked out, Jada. But every single time I follow my gut, I follow my intuition, I follow my heart, that little mix down there, things just work out for the best because it's telling you something. And so that's how I put it into my business. That's how I put leading from the heart, leading from the gut, leading from my intuition into my business is I listen. I listen to that little voice. I listen to how I feel, not just always how I think, because I think people can get into trouble there. So that's how I do it. And this led me to Puerto Rico, and life is good.
You mentioned that, when you didn't listen to your heart, to your gut, to your intuition, that things didn't work out. And I'd love for you to take me back to one of those moments when you didn't listen to your heart.
Oh man, it's so clear. So it's August of 2012. I had interviewed 40 successful entrepreneurs. All those interviews were quote unquote in the bank. I was still pre-launch of Entrepreneurs on Fire, but I was seeing the finish line, meaning like the date that I was actually going to push publish and be finished with my pre-launch and go into real live mode. And I panicked. I freaked out. I was like, this is just not going to happen. And I really knew, because my heart and my gut, my intuition was like, John, it's ready. You're good enough. Like, perfection is not the path to go. Like, you're never going to feel 100% ready. But my brain's like, yeah, but John, like, if you just do this and get this social media account going, and then you like just get that sidebar on your website better, like, it'll be so much more awesome when you publish your podcast. And so I listened to my brain and I pushed back my launch dates, and then I pushed it back again. Then I pushed it back again. And again, I had all the interviews done. I had the podcast. Everything was ready to go. And I was going to keep doing that and doing that. The only thing that saved me, Jada, because I was continuing to listen to my brain instead of my heart, the only thing that saved me is my mentor, Jamie Masters of The Eventual Millionaire, great podcast host. I had hired her back in June, and she had taught me the ropes, and she was holding me accountable. And she finally just got smart to this BS I was kind of throwing out there about why I wasn't launching. And she said, JLD, if you don't launch your podcast tomorrow, I will fire you. And the only thing that I was more scared of than launching my podcast was losing her as my direct mentor, coach, and guidance. And so I launched the podcast, Jada, and I just look back at that being a huge mistake of just delaying for no good reason. And I just wish I had followed my heart.
I love Jamie so much. I had an opportunity to be in a peer-based all-women's mastermind with her, and she is a very, very smart cookie. And I'm curious, you said you had a mentor at this time before you launched the podcast. Were you generating any revenue in your business?
None whatsoever. I had actually quit my job as a commercial real estate broker about 3 months prior to that. And I was all in. So I was going to conferences. I was interviewing people in the pre-launch to get ready for launch. No revenue whatsoever was coming in. And honestly, no clear path to revenue was really there either. I was kind of going on this leap of faith. And I was going to say, you know what? You don't have to see the full staircase to take that first step, that Martin Luther King quote. So I said, I'm going to take that first step. I'm going to let that next step reveal itself. I'm going to have faith and trust that this is going to work out. And let's be honest, if it doesn't, then I'll figure something out. But I have to do this.
Is there something in you, possibly even when you were younger, because I can just hear this inner confidence and trust in yourself, as well as the polar side of not launching when you had 40 interviews in the can. But what was that in you that was like, I'll figure it out, or I'll do something else? Because some people who don't hit play or don't hit publish, there's this voice almost seems louder, the brain that's kind of holding them back. And is there something in you that had that inner confidence, that inner fire? Where did that come from for you?
I'm not really sure where it came from. I can honestly say that I've always had this inner confidence. I've always had this inner fire. It's just always kind of been part of my personality, part of my being, part of who I am. On the flip side, I'm a human being. I absolutely and very often assailed with doubts, with fears. I like to use the phrase the imposter syndrome. And I had that in spades when I was about to launch a podcast, because I was like, how am I going to launch a podcast interviewing successful entrepreneurs when A, I've never been an entrepreneur, so B, I've definitely never been a successful entrepreneur, C, who am I to reach out to Gary Vaynerchuk, to Tim Ferriss, to Barbara Corcoran, and to request their time to come on my show, Mr. Inexperience, with no microphone, no broadcast, no interview, no experience whatsoever. So the imposter syndrome was really holding me down. And there was definitely a confidence that I could figure things out along the way. But on the flip side, it was competing with that imposter syndrome of, who are you to come out and to launch a podcast interviewing entrepreneurs on fire? And it was that battle that I had to deal with. And that's why it was so key, so critical to have somebody like Jamie Masters, who had a successful business podcast, who was a successful businesswoman, who was a successful entrepreneur. And she could help me through the scary times, and she could encourage me through the exciting times. And that's what it was all about. And that's really what made sure, number one, that I launched. And then number two, that I kept up the heat.
And you mentioned, Jamie got you to finally hit publish, or she was going to fire you. Is there, an insight, a big takeaway, something that you learned from your mentorship with her that you still use in your business today?
Absolutely. It's the power of relationships and the power of networking. For me, I went to this conference, the very first conference I ever went to in the world of entrepreneurship. It was called Blog World back in 2012 in New York City. And Jamie was speaking at that conference. So she's like, come down, I'll introduce you to a few people, and we'll start getting you connected into this industry. And so we go down to the conference, we're having a blast. All of a sudden I see Jamie hanging out with a few people. I walk up, and who's there in her little group where she's chatting with? But it's Michael Stelzner, Michael Hyatt, and Pat Flynn. And she was just like, hey, John, I want to introduce you to my friends. Here are these guys. And she's like, oh, by the way, this is my mentee, JLD. He's launching a podcast. It's going to be great. You three should all be on it. And they're just like, yeah, sure. Okay, we'll be on. Only because Jamie had the friendship, had the connections, had networked in a great way up to that point to build the know, like, and trust from those individuals who, were all very high level entrepreneurs back in 2012 and still are to this day, and have continued to take their skills and their businesses to the next level. And it was just like an eye opener of like, wow, Jamie built these relationships through her podcast. She built these relationships through just having these one-on-one conversations and just adding value to their lives, having them adding value back to her life. And I was like, this podcast is not just going to be me speaking to an individual and then sharing their story to an audience. Is going to be that and so much more. It's going to be me building connections and networks and friendships with these individuals. And now I've interviewed over 2,070 successful entrepreneurs, and I've had the honor and privilege of having you, Jada, twice on the show. And it's just like these type of conversations and friendships, and from us being on the show together, and then me being in San Francisco being like, oh, I'd love to reach out to Jada, because I felt like we had a friendship, a connection, because we had connected and had a great 35-minute conversation over Skype on an interview. And that was all it took. And so for me, that was just such an eye opener to see Jamie at work back in 2012. And I just utilized that understanding and that knowledge and that eye opening experience as I move forward into my tens, then hundreds, then thousands. And as I said, now over 2,070 podcast episodes.
So good. And, one of the things that you say at the end of Entrepreneur on Fire, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I'm curious, especially talking about, the power of building relationships. Was there a time when you weren't surrounded by the most inspiring 5 people? And how did you make that shift?
I'd say for the first 32 years of my life, I wasn't. Oh. And that's a reality for me. That's a reality for a lot of people. I went to high school in a very small town in Maine where people really thought small, and there were some really good human beings there, but they just didn't think big. And that was what I was really missing. And then, of course, you go into your first career, and for me, it was the Army, and it was a great place. There was a lot of great people there, but it was very much like, okay, you step in line, you follow orders, you do your thing. Like, you don't think outside of these lines, you think inside these lines. And then it was in corporate finance, and then it was in commercial real estate. I was just kind of surrounded by people who to me were just kind of like, how do I survive today? And that was their big focus. And I just remember thinking over and over again, like, how do I not just survive today, but how do I thrive today? And not just today, but how do I thrive in life, in this world? How can I wake up in the morning and say, wow, I get to look forward to this amazing day? Just like I did this morning, by the way. I woke up here in Puerto Rico, went on an amazing walk, got to work out, got to get some amazing vitamin D, had a blast. We're currently hosting Jill and Josh Stanton of Screw the 9 to 5, who I know you're great friends with, Jada. And been hanging out with them, and I get to look forward to this great conversation with you today. Like, that didn't happen overnight, but that happened because I was intentional and thinking about, that's what I want. That's what I need. How do I get in front of these people? How do I get around these people? And for me, it started by reading the right books. Now, of course, I never met most of the authors of the initial books that I read, because most of them were alive back in the early 1900s, in the middle of the century. But I was hanging out with them on these pages of these books while I was listening to these audio versions, which then led me to listen to podcasts and to hear people like Davis Siteman Garland and Pat Flynn and Cliff Ravenscraft, who had these podcasts back in 2010 and 11 and 12, as I was kind of getting into my entrepreneurial spirit, so to speak. And those conversations and being, having their voices in my earbuds was so inspiring on so many levels. I said, man, these are just people. Like, they're talking about going to conferences and speaking there and meeting up with other people and doing this and that. I need to inject myself into that society. And that's when I found Jamie Masters' Eventual Millionaire podcast. And guess what? She was living in Maine, where she was from. And I was living in Maine, and she was right down the street. And we met up at a Starbucks for a coffee, and we had a great chat. And I asked her to be my mentor, and she said yes. And that's how I started the process of surrounding myself. And it just hasn't stopped since then. And it's been an absolutely wonderful journey.
I love that the shift that you made for the 5 people started with books, and then it expanded to podcast, and then to actual real human beings in real life. I think that's really powerful of what are the voices that are inside your head, because, we have that inner critic that is kind of always could be beating us up or stopping us from taking action on things that we really want. And really, those inner voices are outside voices that have been embedded inside us, right? From our parents, from our friends. And I just think that that is such a powerful insight of that you could shift the voices that you're hearing in your head just by surrounding yourself, by inspiring people with books, if that's all you have access to at the moment.
And it wasn't overnight. It wasn't a snap of the fingers. Like, I had to read these books. I had to study them. I had to listen to them. I had to really take some time and, just absorb what was trying to be like talked about in these books. And again, it just wasn't a snap of the fingers. It had to kind of have me marinate in this to really understand where I really needed to go to take things to the next level. And it was one step at a time, but I got there, and I got there by just surrounding myself by the right words, by the right people, by the right positivity. And here I am today.
What was one of the books that you read during that beginning journey that there was a specific moment or a specific chapter or something that just sparked you into action, not just consuming content, but now you are actually ready to create and do something?
So there's a book by Dale Carnegie called The Strangest Secrets. And what I loved about it is the book itself was phenomenal, but then you could actually go and listen to some of the lectures he gave on the book online as well. And it's just one of those like very bad audio quality recordings because it's so old, but you can just hear his passion and hear his voice, and you hear him talking to the people who are in the audience just being like, yeah, say it, sing it to me. And you're just like, man, there were people like all throughout, our history who have really looked to those who have, created that lifestyle that they want and learn from them and to absorb that content and to go forward. So that book, The Strangest Secret, really inspired me to a lot of levels, and hearing his actual voice after reading the book, then I was like, oh, that's what he sounds like. Oh, listen to the passion he's saying that sentence. I just read it in the book like blah, 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 blah. But when he said those same words, but with this passion, with this verve, I was like, whoa, that even makes more impact with those words. And that's one reason why with Entrepreneurs on Fire, like I've always had that desire. I'm saying, if I'm going to be interviewing somebody and there's going to be people listening to this, I want to try to bring energy and passion and excitement, even if sometimes it gets a little corny. I mean, I start my interviews off by asking my guests, are you prepared to ignite? And I do that because I want my guests to be like, all right, if JLD is going to be this corny, or if JLD is going to kind of like take it to this energy level, at least I can step up from like a 2 or a 3 to like a 6 or a 7 if he's like at a 9 or a 10. Because I want my listeners to be there, to be on their run, or to be, sitting in a plane, or to be folding laundry, to be hearing our voices, and to just be like, oh man, this is inspiring because I can hear it in their voice. And that's one reason, John, honestly, and I mean this sincerely, and I know your listeners will back me up on this, is that's why I wanted you to launch a podcast, is because you can write incredible words, no doubt, but you would just have this way of speaking, this way of talking where you really allow, because it is something you have to allow. Most people just don't allow their passion, their hearts, like their meaning into their words, but you do. You speak that way, that you speak through that, like it's honestly in a great way dripping with your emotion, your voices, and that's meaningful, and people connect with that. And so that's why I've always wanted you to start a podcast.
Thank you. And speaking of books, you've actually been featured in a book recently, Gary Vaynerchuk. And on your website, it says, I featured JLD in my book, Crushing It, because he's the real deal and he puts in the work. Tell me about the moment that this all happened.
It was pretty cool. I will say that Gary Vaynerchuk was one of those people when I first got a yes from him back in 2012, when I just had launched my podcast. It was one of those moments like, yes, this is huge, because back in 2008 or 2009, I read the book Crush It. And it was one of those early books that I read that really started shifting my mindset and making me think of the possibilities and really opening up my horizons. It did all of those things. So fast forward almost 10 years, I think it was actually almost exactly 10 years to 2018, when he was writing the book Crushing It, he decided to reach out to like 15 entrepreneurs and asked them to be in the book Crushing It. And I was one of those 15 entrepreneurs. It was actually kind of interesting because my favorite number is 14. It always has been my sports number and all these different things. I just loved that number 14. And when finally they said that I was going to be one of the featured entrepreneurs in his book after like the interview process, they're like, and you're going to be chapter 14. I'm like, oh my God, it's all making sense now. It was so cool. So it was just this experience where they reached out. They're like, hey, we're interviewing a ton of people to see which, whatever, I think it was 15 or so entrepreneurs would make the right fit for this book. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going to get my hopes up. And then the interview process happened. I just spoke from the heart. I spoke from the truth. And when I got the word that I was one of those selected, I was like, this is just one of those moments. And it kind of brought me back to this quote where so many people overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can do in a decade. And that kind of spoke to me there, because if you had asked me back in 2008 that, hey, Gary Vaynerchuk's going to write a book in 10 years as a follow-up to Crush It, and he's going to feature you as one of his entrepreneurs who he says has been crushing it, I'm going to say, no way, that's impossible. Just 10 years from now, I don't have any time. But we underestimate, like 10 years, we can get so much done. And like, I just look, at the 6.5 years of launching Entrepreneurs on Fire back in, the end of 2012 into now. I mean, it's incredible what I've done, what I've accomplished, what my team has accomplished, what people in my audience, which I love when you refer to as Fire Nation, has accomplished. It's mind blowing. And I just love that process. And so I just keep coming back, to the word patience. So many people, they just don't have the patience to keep putting in the consistent quality work until they just hit. And you never know that hit's going to come, but when it comes, it's great.
I love that you said that, the patience piece. I actually was just talking with a past client about that of, hey, there's going to be things that you try, and not everything's going to work out, but it's like people want to hire a coach and they want to get the results right away. And if they don't get them right away, then they are like, I guess that coach wasn't for me, or that was the wrong thing, or I invested in the wrong thing again. And so I'm curious for you, especially, in the beginning stages of building your business, how did you allow yourself to be patient? And were there times when you felt impatient about the process? And then how did you get yourself back to like surrendering to the process and the timeline, which is sometimes out of your control?
Patience is truly a virtue, and it is absolutely something that does not come super easy to me. I mean, you put me in a line of like 3 people at Costco, and I'm like pulling my hair out because I'm just like, oh my God, I am so not patient in certain scenarios. But I've learned to be very patient in other areas. And, you know, for me, I kind of look at it like a gardener. You want to have this bountiful harvest. Of course, you can't just snap your fingers and have this wonderful, bountiful harvest appear in front of you. It takes time. You need to find seeds. You need to plant those seeds. You need to water those seeds. You need to weed that garden. You need to tend to those shoots when they first come up. You need to do X and Y and Z, and it's patience. And then they need to grow, and then they need to bloom. It's the process, and that's life. And that's definitely entrepreneurship. And that's definitely success in business, is having that long vision. I like to say the phrase that, you know, we as humans, you know, especially as entrepreneurs, are in a marathon. We're not in a sprint. There's been a lot of people I've had on my show over the past 2,000 plus days of me doing Entrepreneurs on Fire who were in sprints. And guess what? They were successful entrepreneurs. So they were on my show because they fit the bill at that moment in time. And they have since just flamed out over and over again because they were looking at it as a sprint and they were going all in, and they absolutely burned out. And for me, I look at this and say, I want to be able to wake up in the morning and live this balanced, fruitful, fun life. I want to wake up. I want to do my morning routine, which includes working out with my virtual trainer, sitting in my infrared sauna, meditating, then journaling, and then reading a business book for 20 to 30 minutes. Then I want to slowly get up and, you know, do some breakfast and then sit into my office. Like, again, this is like 2 hours later from when I actually woke up, and then kind of ease into my day and have some great conversations and do some interviews for EO Fire or for other shows and enjoy some social media experiences and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and not hit the end of the day feeling like I've had the pedal to the metal the whole time, because that's something that would have meant that Entrepreneurs on Fire would have ceased to exist back in 2014, back in 2015. But the reason why it's still going as strong as ever and continuing to grow off of that strength 6.5, almost 7 years later now, well over 2,000 episodes later, is because I'm taking a balanced approach. And by the way, it wasn't always that way. I've had to learn these things as I've been going forward, looking in the mirror and being like, okay, you're not the best version of yourself right now. This might have been back in 2013 to 2014. How can I take a step in the right direction? And every month, every year, every time I'm actually like having this one-on-one with myself, it's always, how can I improve some facet of my life so that I can continue to do what I want to do, which is to create content that I'm passionate about, create content that's adding value to the world, that's inspiring other people, that's adding the ripple effect of them inspiring other people, and so on and so forth. And right now, as you and I are speaking, I'm at a wonderful place. But you know what? That can all change. Something can happen in the future that is not in my control. And I also know on the flip side that I can keep improving, that I can keep taking steps up. And it's always going to be this journey of me wanting to reach that next level. And once I reach that next level, okay, what's that next challenge I'm going to put forward for myself? Like, this is the journey of life. This is not for me just like the sprint to, you know, $1 million. This is, how can I do what I'm doing now in 50 years at the same level of enjoyment that I'm doing it today? And that to me has always been the focal point.
I love that. I'm curious if you could tell me about a specific time something you planned in your business didn't work out the way you expected, and how you actually managed your expectations of success and setbacks.
Great question. So back in 2015, I was thinking, what can I do that would maybe spice some things up a little bit with my business and change things up? And I said, I really feel like journaling's been super impactful for me. So what if I launch an actual journal that I think will help my audience, a journal that I'll create and that will have such a positive impact on people's life. And this will be kind of spicing things up because it's going to be a physical product. I'm going to, for the first time in my life, create a physical product. And so I spent a lot of time wargaming, thinking, masterminding about what this would be. And it came out as the Freedom Journal. And the Freedom Journal was all about accomplishing your number one goal in 100 days. And I met incredible people through the process. And I was able to have a beautiful journal created. And January 4th of 2016, I had ordered 40,000 journals. They were all in the warehouse. They were ready to go. I launched the campaign on Kickstarter and it absolutely crushed it. I mean, we did $453,000 in just 33 days in that Kickstarter campaign, way exceeded our expectations. And afterwards, the sales just kept coming and coming and coming, and it was a total success. So what did I do? Like most entrepreneurs, I'm like, oh, how can I replicate this success? And so a couple months later, I'm still thinking, and the Freedom Journal's crushing it, and everything's going well in that area. And I'm like, well, how about I create another journal? And so I sat down and I said, I want to create a different journal with a different concept. And I came up with the Mastery Journal, how to master productivity, discipline, and focus in 100 days, which I believed were my three greatest strengths. And I wanted to share with others how they could make those great strengths for them as well. So I went through the exact same process. And of course, I'm just like, well, now I have tens of thousands of people who have bought the Freedom Journal, and I've proven myself and I have the systems and everything in place. Like, I think that we're probably going to like potentially double sales of the Freedom Journal launch, which we did, again, 453K in 33 days, which I should have had a little bit of a hint there. I mean, that was the second most funded journal campaign of all time on Kickstarter. So it was just had done unbelievably well. And so we did the exact same thing a year later, and the Mastery Journal came out, and it just didn't hit like the Freedom Journal did. Again, I was hoping for and expecting double, and we ended up doing about half. So still, financially, $280,000 in 33 days for a journal. Big success. I'm not diminishing that on that end, but it way fell below our expectations. And it has not since then, which is 2017, sold nearly as well as the Freedom Journal. The Freedom Journal still sells it 3 or 4 to 1. So that was just an example of me just saying, how can I replicate this success instead of how can I build off of my success? Because looking back in hindsight, this is just me like having thought about this for a while. It's super obvious to me why the Mastery Journal now I can see wasn't as successful as a Freedom Journal for a number of reasons. Number one, I had never done a physical product before, and I launched the Freedom Journal as my number one thing. It was the first thing that came out. It was a great idea. Accomplish your number one goal in 100 days, right at the new year. Everybody loved it, and it crushed it. And boom, it did it. Now, a year later, my initial buildup of an audience for 3 or 4 years prior to that launch, a lot of them had already gone and invest in the Freedom Journal. So they had that check. They loved it, and they were going to keep buying Freedom Journals. We have people that have bought over 10 Freedom Journals to this point. Every 100 days, they're just buying another one. They didn't want a different journal. They loved the Freedom Journal. And so the Mastery Journal, it wasn't what people like to say a brand extension. It was like I built a competitor of my own brand. And I was like, you're going to buy the Freedom or the Mastery Journal. Like, why would you buy both? Of course, you probably wouldn't. You can, but it's like, And so I kind of built myself my own competitor when I could have just like built off the strength of that. And I know that you probably have some great examples from your days, with Simple Green Smoothie, like on how you either did that or you avoided doing that. So that was just like, to me, this huge eye opener of, okay, we need to really think and be strategic because, just because one thing crushed it doesn't mean you do that almost identical one thing again for very obvious reasons now, which again, to me at the time weren't very obvious, but they are now.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And it as you add on, you expand your product suite, there does become this competition even just for your launch schedule, right? Of how you communicate your offers to people. So it's a great reminder, and also paying attention to the variables that are different of like, I had this audience that had never had a physical product from me. Well, they all bought it. And so they're complete. So I just think that that's really cool. One thing that I heard you say was like, war game and like mastermind. And I just want you to like pull me in to your brain when you are strategizing, mapping out, brainstorming, coming up with a new idea. Like, tactically, like, what are you doing? Are you like, you have a poster paper, you have a journal? I'm just curious, when you go in to like sit down on a new idea, how do you actually approach it?
Yeah, so when I sit down on a new idea, I am a big dry erase board guy. So I have a huge dry erase board in my office, and I just like to work out ideas, work out plans on it. And I'll snap a picture of it when I'm going into a race mode after that, and to kind of regain that and re-war game that and kind of go through that process. But for me, it's just like putting things down on paper. That's why I love journaling every single day. That's why I love the dry erase board, because it's just me putting something down, and there's the process of like writing it out. It's kind of sparking new ideas and new accountability and just new focus when I'm driving forward with that new concept, with that new idea. But the most important thing, and I think the most valuable thing that I do when I'm workshopping a new idea, is something that sounds super easy. And people might even say to themselves right now, oh yeah, I would totally do that. But when it comes down to it, they just don't, because they're either just not going to set up the time to do it, or more likely because they're nervous and scared to do it, because I get it. And that is, you have to find the people who you think would be perfect for this product, for this service, for this idea. And you have to get a one-on-one call with them, and you have to have that conversation. And so the conversation I love having with these individuals when I'm coming up with these new concepts and ideas is, listen, around this topic, what is your number one struggle? What's your biggest pain point? And if they don't come up with the idea that I have around that topic as one of the biggest pain points, then I know that it's not going to be a big enough deal, a big enough problem, that my solution isn't going to be the answer for them, because I have to create a solution for a significant, real, actual pain point. Otherwise, people aren't going to add this to their life, because everybody's busy. People work hard for their money. If you are actually going to have them invest their time, their energy, their bandwidth, their money into something, it has to provide a real solution. So with the Freedom Journal, what was a real problem people were having? They were setting all these New Year's goals, or just any goals throughout the year, and they weren't accomplishing them. It was a real problem that people were kind of having slapped in their face year after year after year. And so the Freedom Journal was the solution to that problem. And because I had great conversations with multiple people who verified that during my creation process, I was able to say with a lot of confidence, hey, I'm going to go buy 40,000 of these journals, because I do know that I have a large audience with Fire Nation. I do know that I have a real solution to an actual pain point that people are having. So let's make this happen. And so it was because of that process, those one-on-one conversations, that I did know I had a winner on my hands.
How many people did you end up talking to on voice-to-voice conversations for the journal?
50. So I had 50 one-on-one conversations, because the thing is unless you are having a legitimate majority with a real number of people, then you might get some bad intel. Like if I just talk to like 5 or 6 people, 1 or 2 of them might say something that's kind of off the wall, but because like that equates to like 30 or 40% of the calls, I might actually put some credence into it. But if I have 45 more calls and none of those other calls mention those one or two things. And I know that, hey, this is a small percentage. This is a small problem. So you have to deal with legitimate numbers. I think, 30 is a minimum. I went for 50 because I wanted it to get real. And I wasn't having these hour-long conversations. I was having 5 to 6 to 10-minute conversations with these people, just asking them very detailed questions and really being honest with them that all I was looking out of this conversation was their honesty back to me. And that was where I really got some great intel.
What I love is that, when you created the journals and I had the opportunity to promote it and share it with my community when it launched, but is that you had already created products, courses, had success, and you still, in a future product creation, got on the phone with 50 people to have real conversations. And I think it's just so important for people to hear that, that really, researching and studying the market that you want to serve and being able to really help them solve a problem that is real for them is just really important. But I think it's even more fascinating that you still take the time to do that as you create products.
Well, one of my very recent guests, Peter Rex, I just had him on and he used this word, so I have to give him credit for it, but it's so fitting in this scenario, and that's humbled. It's a combination of the word humble and bold, and it's so true. Like, as entrepreneurs, we have to at all times stay humble, because I'm telling you, if you don't just maintain that humility, then believe me, you're going to get slapped across the face with reality, because it's just going to happen. But at the same time, even while being humble, you can still be bold. You can still be courageous. Have that humility, combine it with the courage, and go forward with that. So even though I had built a 7-figure a year business and I had a massive audience in this, I still forced myself to have that humility and that humbleness to say, listen, I'm going to do a bold venture, but not until my audience proves that this is something I need to do. So that's one thing I would challenge people with, is that humbled, be humble, be bold, be both.
I love that. And something that you still do to this day is actually share your income on a monthly basis online. And there was this one thing that I was looking at, is you actually have this profit pie, a little chart on there, which is really, really cool, showing like where all the revenue is coming from, right? So EO Fire sponsorship, affiliate revenue, the journals, online courses. And what I found fascinating when looking at that was, one, that everything was actually pretty equal, but it was actually more in the podcast, like that had grown, which I think was smaller before. And like, online courses and affiliate was probably like a bigger part of the pie. And it just feels like it's like inverted or shifted. And I'm just curious what you have seen in that shift and any intentionality in diversifying your revenue stream as, the online world is constantly shifting and changing.
Absolutely. We published our 64th consecutive monthly income report very recently. And it's something that, again, we've just been doing now since really the middle of 2013. And Kate and I love it for a number of reasons. Number one, like, we love transparency. We love showing other people the fact that we're making real money by providing real value. Pat Flynn is actually the person who showed me the way back when I was just having an idea to launch a podcast and to become an entrepreneur. Seeing his income reports was like, oh man, so there's good people doing good things, making actual money in this. And that just was this breath of fresh air. And so I said, if I ever get to the point where I'm generating significant revenue on any means, I want to give that same kind of confidence and guidance to others as well. So it's something that we implemented as soon as we could in our business. And we've done it for 64 straight months. It's been a blast. And yeah, there's definitely been a lot of fluctuations and different things along the years now. I mean, we're talking like 5 years of doing this. So it's been really interesting to kind of see what's been happening. And for a long time, to bring back what you were saying about courses, I mean, it was just like killing it course-wise. It was, you through a webinar and people show up and they're fired up, and you make an offer and people are just buying it. I mean, Kate and I would do these live webinars every single week for Podcasters Paradise, and we'd have a ton of people show up. and just a ton of people buy. And the reason is because we were offering a great solution to a real problem: how to create, how to grow, how to monetize your podcast. But the key, really looking back in hindsight, is, man, there was just so few people doing it. It was like we were doing these live webinars and like nobody was doing live webinars. We had this like incredible course, and there were a couple courses out there, but there just weren't a ton. And as time's gone on, it's just people, they see what works. They see our income reports, and guess what? A lot of people replicate ours and other people's successes. And it's just a lot more noisy of a world now. And there's a lot of courses and this and that and this and that. And competitions popped up with this side and that side as well. And so that side of the business, we've had to say, listen, it's just not as big as it is anymore. I mean, it's $30,000 to $40,000 a month. I mean, we're not, crying pauper or anything. I mean, it's still incredible money, but it's not where it was before, where sometimes we would do 70, 90, sometimes we even cross $100,000 a month in course sales. That wasn't like a launch. That was just doing a few webinars over a month. So it's just a shifting of the times. And, as my podcast has continued to grow and become more successful and have now over 1 million listens per month, just the natural sponsorship revenue has gone up from that, because now sponsors have to pay more because there's more listeners. And also there's so many more sponsors out there, because back in 2013 and 14, man, there's a few, I can name them on one hand, like companies that sponsored podcasts. And to their credit, they sponsored a lot because they saw the ROI, but just nobody else had caught on yet. So there was like LegalZoom and Squarespace and ZipRecruiter, 99 Designs. Like those were the sponsors of almost all of the podcasts. But then these other companies started coming in and bidding up the CPMs, which is the cost per 1,000 listens. And there's so many companies out there now looking to sponsor podcasts that our revenue through there is just going through the roof on that. It's just growing, growing, growing. Even though we used to do 30 episodes per month, now we do 8, but we still make as much or more sponsorship because we're making so much more per episode. It's like through the roof. So that's just the shifting of the economy. That's a shifting of the mindset. That's a shifting of just the world that we live in. And for me, I like to kind of flow like water and ebb and flow and see the trends and jump on those and do what we can and have fun doing it, but not force anything. Again, going back to what I said earlier, the Mastery Journal in hindsight was kind of forcing things. Like, am I glad I created it? Yes, because I love the journal. I think it's some of my best work ever. And I know a lot of people, I mean, we sold tens of thousands, have been impacted by it in a major way, but it was kind of forcing things. And so for me, I learned from that situation and saying, I don't want to force things. I want to do things that feel right. Like I don't want to push. I kind of want to have that pull and just make that natural.
Yeah, which brings us back to, right, really listening to your heart, your intuition, allowing that to guide you. And also I hear the consistency in there as well that we talked about of, being so consistent with the podcast and building things that have more of a long game vision, that like I don't think you monetized the podcast right when it came out. Is that right?
That is true. It took us about 7 months for significant revenue to start coming in. And by significant, I don't mean like it wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars, just like meaningful money, like thousands of dollars.
Right. And just seeing how that something that you stayed consistent with over time and adding value to people's lives has now created, a big portion of that profit pie. And I know you're talking about kind of the changes that are happening in the online space. And I'm just curious, what's on your radar right now as you look ahead to the trends and the changes that are happening?
What's on my radar right now, honestly, because this is what is driving my passion and my curiosity, and that's self-care. And self-care can take a lot of forms. It can take the form of meditation, the form of journaling, the form of just overall health and wellness. But for me, Kate and I have been doing really well financially for a really long time. In our move to Puerto Rico 2.5 years ago, and taking advantage of Act 20, which means we pay a total 4% flat corporate tax, no federal, no state, has really put us in a very strong and enviable financial situation. And it's really made me say, like, where is my passion going? Like, where do I see the trends going? And for me, it's about that. It's about people saying, I want to feel better. I want to look better. I want more energy. I want to prioritize sleep. I want to prioritize the quality of the food that I eat. And I've been trending in that direction for quite a long time. And I'm actually going to be launching a little something coming up here in 2019 that is specific in the health area, because that, again, is what I'm learning. I'm currently getting my integrative health practitioner certification right now, which it's not like I'm going to medical school. Like, it's nothing that crazy. It's just a certification, but it's learning incredible stuff in the functional and naturopathic health world. And I find it fascinating. And I'm just seeing so many people that are just so excited about this, and so many people that have made, millions or billions of dollars are taking that money and saying, hey, this money's only good if I can actually live a healthy and vibrant life. And so they're investing so much money in these age-defying and these great opportunities for people to improve the quality and the potentially even the longevity of their life. But even more so, the longevity is like, how about those years you live, the quality of them? So that's where I'm seeing a lot of things going right now, probably because that's where my curiosity is. So I'm just tending to see more of that as well. And that's what I'm excited about, because that's what I want. I want to be talking to you, Jada, in 50 years and still feeling energetic and happy and excited and full of life and energy. And I think it's super possible.
Oh, I just had the hugest smile on my face when you told me about the certification and just following your curiosity and passion, because there's so many things that came up for me. One, just around, that lifelong commitment to learning, right? No matter how much revenue you make or all of those pieces, the accomplishments that you achieve, that we are on this constant quest to learn, and then for you to impart what you're learning and sharing it with others. And I agree that, in the online space and business building, there's a lot of burnout that happens, and a lot of pushing. And I see that shift within yourself and being able to, you've been such an example. I remember seeing videos of you like running on the bay in San Diego and all
Look at my Instagram picture today. You'll see me literally doing crunches on a palm tree hanging over the ocean. It's a cool photo.
Oh, I'm going to have to check that out for sure. But I think that that's really powerful of that. We want the energy and the capacity to be able to sustain ourselves, because without that, we're not able to grow a business. Without our health and our vitality, we're not able to show up for our loved ones. And so I think what you're leaning into with this curiosity and this passion and service at the same time is a win-win-win for everybody.
Totally agree.
I love it. Now, one thing that I want to ask you before we start to close up is, what does your current work week look like right now, especially as you're integrating yourself? Do you theme out your days? What does your typical work schedule look like? I remember I used to do the 8 podcasts in one day, but now you're doing 8 podcasts a month. So I'm just so curious of what your routine is now in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I'd love to share. And I've kind of already given a little bit of a teaser with what my morning routine looks like. So I'll run through that pretty quickly. But typically I like to wake up to the sun. I like to wake up as naturally as possible. I do have an alarm clock set just so I don't oversleep, but I typically am getting up around 6:30 to 6:45 because I have a 7 o'clock date with my virtual trainer every single morning down in my gym. So I wake up, pound some water, go down to my gym, have a Zoom video virtual training session with my trainer, Jeff McMahon. He's actually the same trainer who trains Amy Porterfield, Pat Flynn. He's just a great dude.
I love him.
He's so great.
Yeah, I did a group session with him, and I was like, oh, this is amazing, being able to mastermind your way through health. It was
yeah. And I've been working with him for 3 years. So he puts me through a killer workout. Then I jump into my infrared sauna. So I'm just sweating and purifying my body and just getting rid of heavy metals and toxins, and just feels great to sit there. And I'm usually watching some kind of educational documentary, or let's be honest, I'll just, watch a little pleasure show on Netflix and just have some fun there, if, whatever that might be. And then I'll go out.
John, what's your current Netflix binge right now.
It's the show You, Y-O-U. Have you seen it?
No, I'm going to go check out the trailer.
Oh man, it's intense. Woo, it's intense. Then after I've been sitting in 160-degree heat for 30 minutes at that point. So I'm overheated. So I go out I have an outdoor shower by my pool, and then I just take as cold a shower as Puerto Rico will allow, which isn't super cold, but it is cool, and take a cool shower to kind of rinse off. And then I go by my pool and I lay out and I am journaling, and then I am meditating, and then I am reading a business book, and I'm just like taking the time to lay out by the pool, relax, do those 3 things while I'm taking in the beautiful Puerto Rico vitamin D just coming at me live. And that's my morning routine as far as self-care, because then I go upstairs, I'll take an actual shower, brush my teeth and all that stuff, and then sit into my office, and I get there probably around 8:30ish. And then from 8:30 till typically 2 to 3 p.m., I'm in the office doing things. I'm working on a project. I'm taking my integrative health practitioner certification, which is like a 9 to 12 month process. So that's going to be part of my life for the foreseeable future. I'm obviously doing the things like the emails and the social medias and doing the work and all that kind of jazz. And then I like to close things down by 3, definitely by 4. I'm done with the office for the day. I love taking a walk right at that time, because it's just the sun's starting to kind of head down towards the mountains, and I get to go on this beautiful just stroll through my neighborhood, listening to a podcast, catching up on one of my favorite podcasts at the time, which is just a blast, or maybe listening to an audiobook too. And then coming back, and Kate's kind of wrapping up with her evening routine as well, and she loves to cook, so she's cooking some food, and then we're sitting down, and then we're watching our show that we're currently doing together. We always have a show that we watch together at night, and which is Handmaid's Tale. Have you seen that?
I'm afraid. I'm like, is it going to mess with my nervous system?
I think it will.
But all my friends are so addicted.
I think it will. I don't know. You might not want to go there.
I'm watching Felicity from like way back in the day.
Throwback time.
Yes, like the late 90s. And I love to, my husband and I watch a lot of like stand-up comedy together.
Oh, cool.
I love to
Netflix
laugh.
is great for that.
Yeah, I love to laugh, and I love to watch people fall in love. So
then stay away from Handmaid's.
Right.
Neither one of those things happen ever. And then, that's just a nice evening. And honestly, like, I don't pretend like that I'm some raver or rager. Like, I'm literally trying, this is my goal. Honestly, I've tried to be walking up into bed by 9 to 9:15. And I read typically for 15 minutes, and I'm asleep by 9:30. I mean, literally, I love it. I have an Oura ring, O-U-R-A, which I'm obsessed with because it tracks your sleep, and it gives you a sleep score every single morning. So I wake up, one of the first things I do is check my sleep score to see, what was my sleep score? How long was I in deep sleep and light sleep and REM for and XYZ? And it holds you super accountable. Like, I used to think going to bed at 10 and waking up at 6 meant I got 8 hours of sleep. Like, not even close. Like, I was getting like 6 hours and 30 minutes of actual sleep from that schedule. I mean, you have to be in bed for like 9 to 9.5 hours if you want to even come close to 8 hours of real sleep. So that's changed some things for me in a great way, and I've loved that. To your question about kind of the batching I used to do, as far as like the 8 interviews once a week, I used to do that for years when I had a daily show. Now, because my quantity is so much less, I really only have 2 days per month. And so 1 day per month, I do 8 interviews for EO Fire. And so that takes care of the whole month in that 1 day. And then 1 day per month, I do 25 interviews on other people's shows. And so it's just 1 day. I have all of the shows I'm going to be on, other people's shows lined up, and I just knock it out that 1 day. And so then the rest of the month, the other like 28, 29 days of the month, I might have a sporadic webinar here. Like, I just did I promoted Amy Porterfield's Digital Course Academy. So we did a big joint webinar for that. And I'll do sporadic things throughout the month in that area. But I'll tell you, people would be shocked. And I tell this to Kate all the time. I'm like, people would be shocked at how empty my calendar is. And believe me, I worked hard to get there and to make that happen. But I mean, my calendar, man, it is empty, and I love it.
I love that because I know the shift, like I know the focus and the productivity and work that you put into building your business and your empire. And just curious if there's anything that we haven't covered that you'd love to share that would be helpful for the listeners as we say goodbye.
No, honestly, I think we've covered some amazing things. Obviously, I think your listeners would really enjoy some of the great audio masterclasses that I produce over at Entrepreneurs on Fire. So if anybody needs another podcast to listen to, definitely check that out. And something that Kate and I are both actually very proud of is we create these world-class free trainings and free courses for entrepreneurs, a free course on podcasting, on webinars, on funnels, on coming up with your big idea. They're all completely free at eofire.com.
I love it. And I'll definitely be linking to that in the show notes so that everyone can find you.
Look
and
at you with the podcast lingo.
Well, I appreciate you so much. And thank you for taking the time in your spacious calendar to just share your wisdom and your journey with us.
Thanks, Jada. It was awesome.
Thank you so much for your heart and attention in listening to Lead with Love. If this message, leading with love in life and business, and remembering the humans and beating hearts behind the numbers and all of that good stuff, I would love for you to take the time to leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people find out about the goodness and helping spreading more love in the world, which we really, really need. So I would really appreciate that, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.